opposition parties are really hammering cost of living issues today and the numerous things they feel your government could be doing. I know it extends both within and beyond your portfolio, but what would you say to the idea that, be it the carbon tax, be it the restrictions around travel, there's more you could be doing to help people make ends meet?
Well, I would say it's top of mind for everyone in the country, not only from a political perspective, but I'd say citizens and governments across the nation, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal. We've seen the inflation across the world, largely driven by the war in Ukraine, the price of oil, the price of food. So I think everyone is seized of the issue and trying to find ways to make life more affordable for Canadians from coast to coast. In my, within my remit, obviously I seize the Competition Bureau. You've seen to make sure that we would be looking at any practices that could be anti-competitive, that would be detrimental to consumer, and we'll continue to do that because obviously we're looking at every sector. You saw I seized twice the Competition Bureau, asking them to really monitor, to pay particular attention as we see the price of gas going up, the price of food going up, and we'll continue to monitor. Obviously, I think one of the things we've achieved recently, which helps the cost of living, is childcare across Canada, because if you're a family in many parts of the country, that's a big part of your budget, your personal budget. So we'll continue to look at measures across the board we could do. Parce que c'est un outil, vous savez, quand on est devant une situation comme celle-là, je pense qu'on a la responsabilité, le devoir de regarder tous les outils à notre disposition. Un des outils, évidemment, c'est le Bureau de la concurrence, parce que je suis vigilant. C'est pas que j'ai peur, mais je joue de prudence et de vigilance. Quand on voit le prix de l'essence augmenter comme ça, on sait que c'est largement causé à cause de la guerre en Ukraine, c'est un prix mondial, on comprend tout ça. Hein? Par contre, on a vu aussi certaines pratiques dans le domaine de la distribution alimentaire, où on doit porter une attention particulière. On l'a vu, par exemple, sur le prix du transport des containers qui viennent et qui partent, évidemment, d'Amérique du Nord. Donc, moi, ce que je demande au Bureau de la concurrence, c'est de faire partie des enquêtes. Il y a eu certaines enquêtes internationales qui ont été lancées pour justement essayer d'identifier est-ce qu'il y a des pratiques anticompétitives, est-ce qu'il y a de la collusion, puis essayer de voir ce qu'on peut faire, nous, pour rendre ça plus abordable. Comme je vous dis, c'est un des outils. Il n'y a pas d'outil miracle, hein? Quand on voit une inflation comme ça qui est présente dans tous les pays du G20, certainement on voit la même chose du côté des États-Unis, de l'Europe, j'arrive de l'Europe. Par contre, ce qu'on peut faire, c'est d'être vigilant. Puis pour moi, c'est une des façons d'être vigilant avec le Bureau de la concurrence.
You point to international factors, sir, but the opposition parties are pointing to things like carbon prices and travel restrictions that are still in place because of COVID.
Well, I'm not sure travel restrictions would have an impact on the cost or inflation in Canada. I would say what you're seeing is really global supply chains. And, I come from Europe where I was talking with the G7 ministers. It's really around supply chain, the price of oil, which is driven by the war in Ukraine, the price of food, because ports have been, Russians have been blocking ports in Odessa and others that could allow food. So you see, if you look at the basket of goods that people buy, oil and food is huge drivers of inflation. That's true internationally. That's why you see such a pressure. Now, I would say in Canada, compared to other nations, I would say our inflation rate is lower. However, that being said, we as elected leaders at all levels of governments, we need to look at everything we could do to help Canadian families.
Would you consider a temporary tax break for federal taxes on gas and diesel, sir?
The airport situation, I mean, what can you say? It's obviously doesn't seem to be getting any better. If anything, it's getting worse, and now there's some international attention about the state of things.
Yeah, look, first of all, I know how frustrating it is for passengers who are being delayed at airports. And it's particular at Pearson Airport. We're not seeing as many delays as in other airports that we are seeing in Pearson. Look, my duty is obviously to do everything I can to address this issue and solve it. And first, we need to understand the causes of these issues. We're seeing similar phenomena at Dublin's airport, at Geneva's airport, at Paris's airport, at London's airport, at Amsterdam's airport. So it's really important to recognize that this is a global context. Having said that, we have to do something about it. And we've been adding resources. In fact, I'd argue that the CATSA situation is improving. I look at data regularly. and the percentage of passengers who are waiting 30 minutes or longer has been cut in half over the last couple of weeks. It's still not resolved, but it's improving.
Charter flights for Ukrainians, they are done. The 3 of them occurred. So what's next? Is there any other plans of additional charter flights? Because only around 900 people were airlifted.
So look, still hundreds and thousands of Ukrainians are arriving in commercial or other means. We will continue to work with stakeholders, with airlines, to ensure that Ukrainians who are seeking refuge have a place to stay. So we're working with other stakeholders to figure out what other needs are there, and we will respond to them.
So just commercial flights, no?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are options, and we are working with everyone to make sure that those options are all available.
Pearson, if you could put sort of some kind of time frame around this. I appreciate what you're saying, international issues,
Look,
getting better.
it's the greatest sense of urgency for our government to address. My colleague, Minister Menchino, and I are working. First of all, I want to thank passengers, but I also want to thank all the airport and the airline workers who are really working tirelessly to respond to this, to doing their best. I know it's frustrating. We're going to do everything we can to provide the resources they need, to help logistically, to provide the support that they need. We're working on it. It's important. I understand. But believe me, we're on the job. We're doing
You can't say
it.
when it's going to get better is what I hear.
You said that you're looking for the causes. What particularly about Pearson is causing these delays when they're not happening at other airports? Why is Pearson different?
It's happening everywhere, but Pearson because it's the busiest airport. But I did talk about the variety of factors. One of them is the extreme peaks and valleys. We have a different times of the day where we have a lot of flights arriving at the same time, while at other parts of the day, not as many flights at the same. So there's still airline companies have not returned to full schedule yet. There are still some labor shortage issue. There are some process issues. For example, one of the public health measures that we've lifted, international travelers who are transiting are no longer selected part of random testing to get tested. So we're looking at all these options and we're addressing them.
But I still didn't hear a time frame, sir, is the only thing I would say. I appreciate that you're saying, like, thank you to passengers, but you know
Kathleen,
they don't want to thank you. They want a solution.
Of course,
Yeah.
and I know. And I'm not saying that we can be complacent about this. We're doing everything we can as quickly as we can. And I'm seeing positive signs. I don't know if it's going to be a light switch where tomorrow is no longer going to be an issue. This is a gradual process. We're working on it, and we're going to fix it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Cool, then. Can you give me the update on what Service Canada is doing to try to clear passport lines as we get into busy customer travel season?
We are doing everything we can to work on it. However, as I've mentioned several times, we're in an unprecedented surge when it comes to demand. There's a lot of pent-up demand for passports, so we're trying to process those that are urgent and to ensure that people don't miss their flights. Sorry?
Added more resources to try and catch up on that?
Yeah, we added over 600 since the beginning of the year. We're adding another 600 and we're reallocating coming up the steps. We're reallocating another 600 internally.
There's some talk this backlog could extend to December.
Madame Portier, la décision sur la vaccination obligatoire, je crois que ça s'en vient d'ici la fin juin, c'est ça?
Alors, présentement, comme vous savez, on est en train d'étudier depuis le 6 avril, on étudie la
Mais est-ce que la décision, ça va être d'ici la fin des travaux parlementaires? Vous attendez quand après ça?
On est en train de l'étudier. Évidemment, il y a beaucoup de complexité. La partie que je suis très heureuse de dire, c'est que les fonctionnaires sont à 99% vaccinés et continuent à montrer l'exemple aux Canadiens et Canadiennes. Puis j'encourage de continuer à aller chercher le troisième dose.
Si vous rendez votre décision d'ici la fin juin.
On travaille là-dessus présentement.
Est-ce que les Canadiens ont besoin d'un break dans leur portefeuille? L'inflation monte, tout le monde dit qu'on devrait leur donner un break de taxe. Est-ce que les Canadiens ont besoin d'un break dans leur portefeuille? Puis est-ce qu'on a la marge de manœuvre pour leur donner?
Bien, je vous dirais que présentement, on met beaucoup d'énergie, comme vous savez, entre autres avec des ententes comme la garde d'enfants qui va vraiment ramener de l'argent dans les portefeuilles des familles. Puis c'est une mesure qui va vraiment aider les familles
Mais ça,
à
c'est
pouvoir
à long
avoir...
terme. À plus court terme, là, un rabais de taxe, par exemple. Est-ce qu'on a les moyens, est-ce qu'on a la capacité financière de gérer ça? Est-ce qu'on a la marge de
Comme je
manœuvre
vous dis,
pour leur donner
présentement, on a
quelque
des
chose?
mesures qui donnent de l'argent aux contribuables, entre autres avec l'allocation canadienne pour enfants. On a des mesures qui sont en train de soutenir les familles.
Is the Treasury Board going to reevaluate vaccine mandates?
We are
Okay, what's the schedule on that?
We're currently reviewing the vaccine mandates, and we will report very soon.
Is there still a scientific case for it?
Pardon me?
Is there still a scientific case for it?
We are still making sure that we protect Canadians, and we're using science and...
But right now, is there,
importance.
what are the current concerns?
The government's been reevaluating the idea of vaccine mandates for months now. Why is this taking so long to make a decision?
It's a very complex situation that we have right now. As we know, we're still in the pandemic, and we know that Canadians need to feel safe, and we need to protect the health and safety of Canadians, and that's why we're... Thank you very much.
Well, the rules in the House are clear. Everybody is to be vaccinated. And we have an expectation those rules be adhered to, but it's the House administration that's responsible for that process of making sure that the rules are adhered to, and we have full confidence in the House administration and how they will adjudicate this or other matters.
Lots of arguments are being made, 18,000 can sit in a hockey rink and watch a playoff game, but you can't come unvaccinated to the House of Commons. Is there a discussion where the rules may change here?
Well, look, the situation is very different, obviously. You can make a choice of whether or not you go to a hockey game. This is a workplace. We have people who are immunocompromised. We have people who are in various states of how safe they feel as we continue to move through the pandemic, so that we do everything we can that a workplace is safe and that people feel safe in that workplace. So there's a decision that is made by all parties in terms of what policies make sense from a health and safety perspective, and then we expect everybody to adhere to those policies.
The science suggests that 2 doses does not prevent the spread of infection. So if you're going to keep a vaccine mandate in place, why haven't you upped it to 3 doses instead?
I think we're continue to evaluate both the science and our policies. We have decisions to make in terms of the extension of the provisions that were put in place to the end of June. We're having conversations with other parties. We're evaluating what the science says and what represents best practice to make sure that we have a safe workplace, and those conversations are ongoing.
Is there a deadline for the rest of this session?
Sur le projet de loi C-21, le débat devait commencer vendredi dernier, ça n'a pas eu lieu. Il vous reste quoi dans votre boîte à outils parlementaire pour faire cheminer rapidement ce projet de loi-là dans les prochaines semaines?
Oui, c'était frustrant pour moi parce que c'était mon intention pour la semaine dernière de commencer le débat pour des projets de loi pour des armes à feu, mais malheureusement, il y avait des jeux et des obstructions par les partis conservateurs, mais on va trouver le temps cette semaine pour commencer pour les deuxièmes lectures, les débats pour des armes à feu, et c'est notre objectif d'adopter le projet de loi aussi rapide que possible. Mais c'est évident que les partis conservateurs, chaque jour, dans chaque situation, obstructent pas juste les législations pour les armes à feu, mais aussi pour des autres types de législations. Et c'est un défi chaque jour.
C'était vendredi dernier.
Oui,
aujourd'hui, vous faites quoi? Parce que est-ce que vous allez négocier avec les partis pour y aller dans un processus accéléré? Est-ce que vous voulez...
Oui, je cherche pour une façon d'accélérer les législations. C'est un gouvernement minoritaire, mais c'est un peu frustrant pour moi parce que le Parti conservateur, c'est un parti. Le Parti conservateur n'avait pas une majorité aux chambres de communes, mais maintenant, avec chaque projet de loi, chaque débat, les partis conservateurs obstructent le travail du Parlement. C'était le cas la semaine dernière et c'est le cas avec chaque projet de loi. Et c'est tellement frustrant. C'est important pour les partis conservateurs de participer dans le débat et d'opposer la législation. J'ai pas de problème avec ça, mais d'agir comme le parti avoir le pouvoir d'obstruer totalement les législations du Parlement. Ça, c'est frustrant pour moi.
Il y a C11, il y a C11, il y a C11, il y a C21, il y a aussi C18. Ça fait pas mal de projets de loi où vous accusez les conservateurs de ralentir le processus. Est-ce que c'est encore de leur faute pour tous ces projets de loi-là?
Oui, c'est le cas avec chaque projet de loi. On a beaucoup de projets de loi qui sont tellement importants pour le gouvernement, mais c'est pas juste pour le gouvernement, pour les Canadiens, les Canadiennes. Et on a beaucoup d'appui avec l'autre parti. Et il y a une majorité des députés qui appuient plusieurs types de législation. Mais maintenant, on doit l'utiliser, l'allocation de temps et les autres outils d'avancer la législation. Et c'est pour moi, ça c'est frustrant parce que c'est maintenant, c'est pour mon côté, il semble que le seul objectif pour le Parti conservateur est d'obstruer des autres partis, d'obstruer la législation et de bloquer notre travail. Et ça c'est malheureux.
Mais parlons d'un autre parti que les conservateurs. Le NPD, par exemple, hier, on posait la question à M. Singh. Il disait oui, on est prêt à aider les libéraux à accélérer l'adoption de C21, mais il semble vouloir des amendements. Donc, êtes-vous en train de négocier avec les néo-démocrates pour permettre...
Oui, mais regarde, comme j'ai déjà dit, la semaine dernière, c'était notre intention de commencer le débat pour la législation, pour des armes à feu, mais le Parti conservateur a bloqué notre commencement du débat. Et ça, c'est le cas encore et encore dans chaque pièce de législation. Les partis conservateurs essayent de bloquer la législation et c'est tellement frustrant. Alors, on va continuer de travailler avec tous les autres partis, avec le Bloc québécois, avec les NPD, de trouver une solution, d'avancer à tous les projets de loi qui sont importants pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes.
You've got a de facto majority with the NDP, so why is it so difficult to get this particular bill, Bill 21, but to get your agenda?
Well, let's be very clear. There is no majority. We are working with other parties. These parties are our adversaries. We agree on some things, but we disagree on a lot. This agreement is dealing with supply and confidence. It doesn't deal with the day-to-day of moving forward legislation. That has to be negotiated 1 inch at a time. And every day, that's what I do. I talk with my counterparts in the other parties to find a solution and to find a way to move forward. What's frustrating for me is that when I work with the Bloc Québécois and when I work with the NDP, they tell me, you know, well, we'll help move the legislation, but there are some things you need to change or amendments we're looking for. There's a give and a take, and there is what I think Canadians expect. There is a negotiation that takes place and compromise that takes place. When I'm dealing with the Conservatives, they don't offer anything. They don't say that they want anything. The only thing they do at every stage is block it. And you can take C-14, which is a good example. It's a bill they support. They moved motions to hear their own members. They move concurrence. They block it for a bill they support. So they are in a position, although they have a limited number of members in the House, they have you know, only a third of the members in the House, where they're blocking everybody else from doing their job. And their sole objective seems to be to grind this place to a halt. And their obstruction means that extremely important pieces of legislation that are broadly supported, not only by Canadians but parliamentarians, can't even get to the stages they need to get advanced. That's inappropriate. And, you know, look, I'm here in a minority government. I'm willing to work with anybody. With the Conservatives, we were able to work together on C3. We were able to work together on C4. They came forward with changes they wanted to make. They had things that were important to them. We were able to work together. I've got nothing, zero from the Conservatives. They are totally interested in blocking this place and trying to obstruct its work. They are 1/3 of the House. They're acting like they have a majority, and it is not healthy. It is not good, and it is certainly not what Canadians expect in a minority government, and I think they have to be held accountable for that.
Parce qu'on va siéger plus longtemps à ce moment-là, si vous avez besoin de faire passer tout ça, allez-vous poursuivre les jours de session passés le 21 jours?
Maintenant, je pense qu'on a besoin tout le temps qui est disponible pour nous avec jusque le 23 de juin. Et on a prolongé, et ça c'est le cas pour demain et pour 2 fois cette semaine, de prolonger jusqu'à minuit, de prolonger le temps pour les débats parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'obstructions. Mais on va chercher pour toutes les solutions parce qu'il y a beaucoup beaucoup de législation et qui est tellement important et on doit adopter ça. Et c'est mon intention de l'utiliser tout le temps qui est disponible.
Donc, on ne va pas lever la Chambre plus tôt que la 23.
Oui, on va parler avec les autres partis, mais je pense que c'est important de l'utiliser le temps qu'on a maintenant et de continuer avec ça. Et c'est comme j'ai expliqué, c'est le problème maintenant, c'est pas la quantité de temps, mais c'est l'obstruction. Et ça, c'est la chose qui m'inquiète beaucoup. Thanks so much.
Bonjour, M. Lametti. Sur la décision de la Cour suprême qui a eu lieu il y a quelques semaines là, sur le cumul des périodes d'inadmissibilité à la libération conditionnelle, où en êtes-vous dans l'analyse et qu'est-ce que vous pourriez faire pour répondre à ce jugement, pour ajuster, disons, les lois? Prenez votre temps.
Désolé. Il n'y a pas une grande marge de manœuvre dans le sens que c'est une décision assez claire de la Cour suprême. C'est 9-0, écrit par le juge en chef. Et ça suit une décision assez claire de la Cour d'appel du Québec. Donc, c'est très rare que quelqu'un, même s'il est éligible pour avoir une libération conditionnelle, c'est rare que quelqu'un qui est coupable d'un meurtre multiple est accordé une telle libération. Donc, c'est un système qui fonctionne. Évidemment, j'ai essayé de défendre la loi devant la Cour suprême, mais on n'a pas réussi. Et donc, on est en train de réfléchir, mais la marge de manœuvre est très mince.
Ça va prendre des changements législatifs éventuellement?
C'est difficile parce que la Cour a dit clairement que c'était inconstitutionnel. Et donc, il y a une marge très, très, très petite pour travailler s'il y en a un.
Donc, il faudra modifier le code criminel, finalement, et retirer cet article.
Est-ce que c'est même possible? Donc, l'utilisation de la clause dérogatoire est toujours quelque chose qu'il faut faire avec, je crois, beaucoup d'hésitation. Évidemment, après un jugement, la Cour qu'on a reçu, mais quand même, c'est une valeur qui a été énoncée par la Cour suprême clairement. Donc, d'aller contre c'était une punition cruelle selon la Cour. Et donc, je sais que les communautés affectées sont très déçues. Mais quand même, c'est un principe de base de notre système.
Minister Lametti, I will just ask you about C-19 and the idea of seizing and selling off Russian assets. The idea that some observers say that is on shaky legal ground. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, we'll obviously tailor the provisions so that it could withstand a court challenge. You don't have an absolute right to own private property in Canada. It is there are steps that are taken when expropriations happen at whatever level of government, and we'll be sure to stay within those boundaries.
The question my colleague was asking you in French, I thought your answer was interesting. You know that some Conservative candidates have proposed using the Notwithstanding clause when it comes to this situation. You don't seem to be entertaining that.
Well, in order to use the Notwithstanding clause, it's a very serious situation when you use the Notwithstanding clause. It's a 9-0 decision by the Supreme Court, written by the Chief Justice, calling the inability to get parole, to be eligible for parole after 25 years, cruel and unusual punishment. That followed a decision from the Quebec Court of Appeal that was also quite clear. So there's only a small margin of maneuver there. Using the Notwithstanding clause is very, very serious. You have to do it after very serious reflection because you are going against a fundamental right that has been, in this case, enunciated and elaborated by a court. That's the way it should be used after a court has but still, it goes to our values. I know that those communities are disappointed, and I did try to defend that decision in front of the Supreme Court of Canada, but we failed. It's rare. It is extremely rare that a multiple murderer who is eligible for parole actually gets parole. Paul Bernardo has, for example, not receive parole, and I don't expect it will happen.
Sur la loi 96,
Non, Christian, un instant.
Pour revenir à la question que posait Catherine, là, pour saisir les biens russes, il y a déjà la France et l'Allemagne qui disent c'est impossible de le faire. Pourquoi est-ce qu'au Canada, ça serait différent?
On n'a pas un droit de la propriété privée protégé par la Constitution au Canada. Il y a des mesures justement pour exproprier les biens de quelqu'un à plusieurs niveaux au Canada. Et il y a des étapes à suivre. On va s'assurer que... et c'est exceptionnel aussi, dans le sens qu'on a une guerre illégale en Ukraine. Et c'est une façon effectivement de punir les personnes qui appuient une guerre illégale avec leurs ressources. Donc, on va suivre les étapes et on va s'assurer que c'est légal.
Donc, ça ne serait pas nécessairement tous les oligarques russes qui sont visés par des sanctions, parce qu'il faudra prouver qu'ils ont un lien avec la guerre qui a lieu. Là.
Avec les sanctions c'est effectivement ce qu'on est en train de faire avec les sanctions. On est en train de punir les alliés du régime de M. Poutine.
À ce moment-là, punir un allié, c'est comme punir quelqu'un par association. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'ils ont fait quelque chose de mal durant la guerre.
On a puni les personnes qui l'appuient.
Sur la loi 96, donc la commission English Montreal hier est allée de l'avant. Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à confirmer aujourd'hui, comme vous l'avez fait pour la loi 21, que si le dossier se rend en Cour suprême et une fois qu'il se rend là, vous allez intervenir en tant que...
Pour l'instant, j'ai pas d'annonce. Évidemment, j'ai exprimé, comme je l'ai fait aujourd'hui, de mes craintes à propos de l'utilisation préventive de la clause dérogatoire. C'est quelque chose qui ne devrait pas être employé d'une façon préventive parce que ça évacue le débat politique, ça évacue l'analyse juridique et ça évacue la structure de la charte elle-même. Mais ce qu'on a fait pour le projet de loi 21 et la loi 21, on a surveillé ce que les Québécois et les Québécoises ont fait devant les tribunaux. C'est à eux de s'exprimer là-dessus. Et pour l'instant, je n'ai pas d'annonce sur 96, mais c'est clair qu'il y a des Québécois qui sont contre le projet de loi, qui sont contre la loi, avec des bonnes raisons. Je ne suis pas moins Québécois parce que je suis contre contre la loi 96. Je ne suis pas moins Québécois parce que je suis contre la loi 21. Je suis Québécois et je suis contre.
Monsieur Rodriguez, hier en comité, vous disiez que le projet de loi C11, ça va permettre de remettre aux créateurs canadiens finalement 1 milliard de dollars, donc c'est plus que les 830 millions. À quoi ça va pouvoir servir, si vous pouvez nous donner un peu des exemples?
Mais ça va servir à la création de plus de contenu, que ce soit musical, télévisuel ou cinéma, dans les deux langues officielles, les langues autochtones, et ainsi de suite.
Trouvez-vous que le projet de loi C11 chemine assez rapidement vers le doux?
J'aimerais bien que les conservateurs arrêtent de filibuster. Parce que c'est une chose être en désaccord sur certains éléments du projet de loi, mais à ce moment-là, encore faut-il proposer des amendements. Dans ce cas-ci, tout ce qu'ils font, c'est filibuster le projet de loi, ce qui est extrêmement dommage parce que nos artistes, nos artisans, de partout à travers le Canada, demandent.
Vous auriez aimé que ça soit possible de l'adopter d'ici la fin de la session parlementaire?
Moi, j'aimerais ça qu'on l'adopte le plus vite possible. J'étais au comité la semaine dernière. J'étais assis là pendant 1h15 et la députée Rachel Thomas a filibuster pendant 50 minutes qu'elle a parlé pendant que j'étais là. Je suis parti sans parler. Ils ont recommencé à filibuster hier. Et je pense que c'est un manque de respect envers les institutions démocratiques et envers le milieu de la culture.
Comme ça, le CRTC, vous allez dire à ce moment-là, va être bilingue, mais est-ce que vous allez le mettre dans une loi? Est-ce que vous allez l'obliger ou on faut croire sur la parole?
Ben, moi, je vais vous dire une chose. Tant que moi, je vais être là, il va être bilingue.
Mais pourquoi pas le mettre dans un projet de loi?
Parce que c'est quelque chose qu'on retrouve de façon générale à travers le processus d'embauche du gouvernement. Vous le trouvez ailleurs aussi. Maintenant, encore une fois, quand je vous dis qu'il va être bilingue, il ou elle, il va être bilingue. Merci. Salut tout le monde.
What we signed with Chile yesterday, how is that going to help in Chile and in Canada?
I am thrilled to have signed that MOU. It's something we've been working on for some time. Our countries are so well aligned. 80-plus years of diplomatic relations.
But how is that going to help the
Gender equality is, there are strength in numbers. You know that. I have in my own riding of Toronto Centre a Chilean community. There are communities right across this country. So the two countries coming together specifically on gender equality, which also includes LGBTQ rights, Indigenous rights, is huge. We will be working together, working in tandem, looking at what we need here in Canada to work on more, and what Chile needs. I intend to go there as soon as I can as well.
Right. But for the community, what does it change on a day-to-day basis?
It means the community has more support. There is support in stronger numbers. It means we can compare what we're seeing on the ground. It means informed experiences and lived experiences. Sharing, I represent Toronto Centre. I have the historic gay village in my riding. So sharing the lived experiences of the advocates and the community members in my riding and beyond across Canada, and also learning what's happening in Chile on the ground there, understanding how we can help, how we can advocate. This is how it will help.
Merci.
Thank you, merci. Bon matin.
Some that have suggested that it's taking too long to update the system and it's left this continent sort of at risk. Can you say that this is?
We've actually been making sure at the same time to maintain our systems. For example, we confirmed a contract with Nasittuq Corporation for about $600 million recently for the maintenance of the North Warning System. We have been investing in successive budgets in the maintenance of our continental defense, including by increasing our security and defense investments by 70% since 2017. So we'll just keep working on it. NORAD modernization is the unwritten chapter of strong, secure, and engaged, our 2017 defense policy. And of course, we are building on work we've already done, including to ensure the sovereignty of Canada's Arctic. Thank you so much.
Needing to produce have progress?
Of course, we will continue to work hand in hand with the United States, and I'm very close with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, with whom I speak regularly, and he will be there in Colorado today. Thank you so much. I will be speaking with a number of my counterparts in the Asia-Pacific region when I travel to Singapore for the Shangri-La Dialogue just after Colorado. Thank you so much.
I think the Conservatives have been criticizing the notion that the government is reducing mandatory minimums for gun crimes with Bill C-5 while trying to strengthen gun laws. Do you see a disconnect there?
C-21 takes organized crime very head-on by raising maximum sentences against those who would traffic guns illegally across the border. Contrast that to when the Conservatives last had government, when they abused a sentencing regime that was repeatedly struck down by the Supreme Court of Canada because it was out of touch. It didn't respect the judiciary. So you can send a very powerful signal to criminals that if you're going to traffic guns across the border, if you're going to use guns to hurt and terrorize communities, there will be a stronger and stiffer sentencing regime, with the fact that this government also respects the independence of the judiciary to dispense justice.
How much is the budget of the CBSA increased, though, to crack down on that border smuggling of guns?
Well, so we've already introduced, we have in the budget additional allocations of hundreds of millions of dollars, which will go to the CBSA and the RCMP together, which will allow for more people, more technology, including X-ray technology that will help to examine commercial traffic at the border, and that will help to interdict and prevent gun crime at the border. But it's also important to bear in mind that we've already introduced $350 million under our anti-gun and gang fund. And we're in the process of renewing that envelope in consultation with provincial and territorial partners, which will increase domestic capacity to protect communities as well.
When do you expect the X-ray tech to be in place for CBSA?
I'm sorry?
When do you expect the X-ray tech to be in place for scanning rail cars?
It already is. In fact, I've seen some of that X-ray technology in fine form, and the speed with which they're able to examine commercial vehicles, including some of those 18-wheelers that have firearms embedded in them, is very efficient. It's very effective. I know that there's a desire to increase that capacity across the country, precisely because we know that this is one of the challenges in reducing gun crime at the border.
When do you expect the expansion to be fully implemented on the increase?
It's a rolling initiative, so like they're constantly using federal funds as we provide them year over year to increase that capacity.
Last week you talked about, when you talked about addressing the border concerns, you mentioned all of that. You also mentioned the Wiretap provisions that are coming in. So I just want to understand how you see that working in terms of combating the trade in illegal handguns across the border. Will that, be, like, to what extent would you be able to intercept conversations of Americans or cross-border conversations? That's what I'm trying to understand, how that would work.
No, it's a good question. So in consultation with provincial and territorial partners, as well as law enforcement, what we've done is we've expanded the eligible firearms offenses under the criminal code, right, which can be used to apply for a wiretap. And so if you've got organized crime that is shipping guns from across the border, these additional powers will help to interdict those crimes and stop them either before or as they are occurring, which will help to protect our communities. The other thing I would say is that these new authorities under C-21, which again, law enforcement have said is a very good tool which they will be able to use to help protect communities from gun violence, is that we are reinvigorating the Cross-Border Crime Forum with Secretary Mayorkas, where, again, law enforcement on both sides of the border will be able to share intelligence, share information, and even some tracing technology to do a better job at stopping crime against the border.